So, have you ever stopped to wonder if people from different cultures actually see the world differently? And I don't just mean what they think about, but the very mechanics of how they think. Well, it turns out the answer is a huge yes, and the story behind it is absolutely fascinating. Let's dive right in.
Okay, to really get a feel for this, we're going to start with a super simple test. I'm about to show you 3 things, and all you have to do is decide which 2 of them belong together. Easy enough, right?
Ready? Now, seriously, don't overthink this. There is no right or wrong answer here. Just go with your gut. What's your first instinct?
Here we go. A cow, a chicken, and grass. Which 2 did you group together? Just take a second. All right, got your answer locked in?
Whatever you chose, your answer actually points toward a really powerful and often totally invisible part of how you think. You see, there are 2 very common but fundamentally different ways to solve this little puzzle.
So, which camp did you land in? If you put the cow and the chicken together, you were thinking categorically. I mean, they're both animals, they belong in the same box. But if you paired the cow and the grass, you were thinking relationally. The cow eats the grass, right? It's a connection. Neither answer is wrong, but they reveal 2 totally distinct ways of seeing the world. That first way of thinking, grouping by category, researchers call that analytic thought. It's a style that kind of zooms in on individual objects, pulls them out of their background, and sorts them into neat categories based on rules. And this approach tends to be much more common in the West. And the second approach, grouping by relationship, is called holistic thought. This is where you zoom out. You're looking at the bigger picture, the whole context, and focusing on the connections between things. This perspective is way more common in Eastern cultures. And this very idea was so powerful that it made the lead researcher on this, Richard Nisbett, completely throw out his long-held belief that all human beings basically think the same way. But that just begs a massive question, right? Where on earth did these huge differences in thinking come from? I mean, why would an entire culture lean towards focusing on objects while another is all about relationships? Well, the answer, incredibly, starts more than 2,500 years ago, in 2 worlds that could not have been more different: ancient Greece and ancient China. Just picture it for a second. Ancient Greece was all about these rugged islands in the sea. Your survival often depended on things you did on your own, like being a trader, a fisherman, a sailor. But then you look at ancient China, and it was built on these huge, fertile plains, which were perfect for farming that required massive coordinated effort, things like building and maintaining irrigation systems.
So as you can imagine, that Greek environment really nurtured a mindset focused on the individual, the sailor, the independent thinker. Personal freedom and what you could achieve on your own were everything. Happiness was about reaching for arete, which is this idea of personal excellence, of becoming the absolute best version of yourself you could be.
Now flip that completely on its head and think about the Chinese farmer. Success there was not a solo sport. It was all about the group. This created a mindset built around social harmony, or hua. The community, not the individual, was the main event. And happiness? That was found in making sure your relationships with everyone else were smooth and in sync.
And the crazy thing is, these ancient ways of life didn't just fade away. They've been echoing down through the centuries, shaping everything from the words we use, to the art we make, to even how we think about our own identity.
This table really breaks it down. That Western analytic style tends to focus our attention on the main object in any scene. It leads to languages that are packed with nouns, which are great for naming things. On the flip side, the Eastern holistic style pays more attention to the whole picture and the relationships in it, which leads to languages that are more verb-focused, emphasizing actions. And this difference just ripples outwards, affecting everything, how we see cause and effect, and even who we think we are.
Okay, get ready for a bit of a mind bender. Check out this famous paradox from the ancient Chinese philosopher Gongsun Long. Now, to a typical Western rule-based brain, this sounds crazy. Of course a white horse is a horse, but Gongsun Long's point was that the word horse refers to a shape, while the word white refers to a color. So the combination white horse is a totally different concept than just the general category of horse. It's a way of thinking that prioritizes context over some universal abstract rule.
You can literally see this difference in art. In traditional Western art, the hero is often front and center, big and bold, dominating the whole picture. But in traditional Eastern landscape paintings, you sometimes have to hunt to even find the people. They're just small, tiny parts of a much bigger, more harmonious natural world. The focus is the whole scene, not just one piece of it.
And this even shapes our deepest beliefs about who we are. The analytic tradition tends to see the self as this stable, core thing, an essence that doesn't really change over time. The holistic tradition, though, sees the self as much more fluid, something that's constantly being shaped by its relationships and experiences. It's the belief that anyone, with enough effort, can fundamentally change who they are.
So, what we have here are these two very different mental maps for making sense of reality. But why is it so important to understand them, especially in the world we all live in today?
You know, the most important thing to get here is that this isn't about which way is better or right. Analytic and holistic thinking are just two different toolkits. Each one has its own strengths, its own blind spots, and each offers a really valuable way to look at our complicated world.
And honestly, knowing which toolkit you're naturally using, and maybe more importantly, when to borrow a tool from the other kit, it's like a superpower. It helps you communicate better with people from all over the world, it lets you tackle problems with a lot more creativity, and maybe best of all, it helps you see the invisible cultural software that's running in the background of your own mind. It's really about adding a whole new dimension to how you think.
Which kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. In this incredibly connected world of ours, what really serves us best? A sharp focus on the individual piece, or a wide view of the web of relationships that connects everything? Or maybe the real wisdom isn't about choosing one over the other, but in learning the art of seeing both at the same time.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling a really fascinating question. Do people from different cultures literally see the world in different ways? We're going to dive into some mind-blowing work by psychologist Richard Nisbett to uncover the hidden frameworks that shape our very thoughts.
Okay, let's just start with a quick thought experiment. Go ahead, take a few seconds and actually answer that question for yourself. How would you describe you? Because believe it or not, your answer probably reveals a profound and usually invisible difference in how we all process the world around us.
So, when researchers asked this exact question, they found this striking pattern. Westerners, especially Americans, tend to list these stable, internal personality traits. They use adjectives, right? I'm friendly, I'm diligent. But Easterners, they're much more likely to describe themselves in terms of their relationships and the situation they're in. Not just that they work hard, but that they work hard at their job. The thing is, this isn't really about personality, it's about thinking.
And this difference isn't just some random quirk. No, it actually comes from two fundamentally different cognitive toolkits. Think of them as operating systems for the mind, and they've evolved over thousands of years to shape everything from our sense of self to how we even search for truth.
So first up, we've got the analytic view, which is really dominant in the West. The best way to think about it is like a spotlight. It pulls an object out of its background so you can analyze its properties. The world is basically seen as a collection of separate things that you can sort into neat categories and understand using formal rules of logic.
And on the complete flip side, you have the Eastern holistic view. If analytic thought is a spotlight, holistic thought is a wide-angle lens. It sees the world as this complex, interconnected web. You can't really understand any one part in isolation. You have to see all the relationships, the context, the whole big picture.
All right, so let's see how this actually plays out in real life, because it starts from the moment we are born. These frameworks aren't just academic theories. They literally shape how we parent, how we work, and what we value.
You can see this so clearly in studies of mothers playing with their babies. An American mom, for example, might point to a toy truck and start labeling its parts. See the truck? It has wheels. See? She's teaching the child about objects and their attributes. But a Japanese mother? She's way more likely to use that same truck to teach social routines. Here's the truck. I give it to you. Now you give it to mommy. She's teaching the child about relationships.
And these values are baked right into our common sayings. You know, in the West, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It pays to be an individual, to speak up. But in the East, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. The priority is harmony within the group. These aren't just cute phrases. They're basically instruction manuals for how to succeed in each culture.
And get this, it even affects what motivates us. In one study, American students did better on a task after they were told they did well. Praise was the fuel. But for Japanese students, the complete opposite was true. They worked harder and did better after being told they had failed. For them, criticism was the motivation for improvement.
Now, this deep divide in thinking also dramatically changes how we make sense of the world, especially when we're trying to figure out why something happened. Do we look for the cause inside the person, or do we look at the situation around them? Let's look at a tragic but very real example from 1991. A Chinese graduate student at an American university was upset about losing an academic award, and he shot and killed several people. The media coverage of this awful event became a perfect case study in these cognitive differences. So American newspapers, like the New York Times, took a classic analytic approach. They zoomed in on the shooter's internal disposition, his bad temper, his disturbed personality. The cause was inside him. Chinese newspapers, they took a holistic view. They zoomed out to look at the context, his isolation, the pressures of the academic system, his relationship with his advisor, even potential racism he might have faced. And this difference in focus isn't just for big, complex events. It drills down to the most basic level of how we categorize simple objects. In a classic experiment, people were shown an object, like this cork pyramid, and told, "This is a dax."
Then they were shown two other things, a plastic pyramid and a block of cork. When they were asked, which of these is also a dax, Americans overwhelmingly chose the plastic pyramid. Why? Because they grouped by category, by shape. But the Chinese participants, they chose the cork block. Why? They grouped by relationship, the substance it was made from. I mean, this is huge. It shows that we're not all just seeing the same reality. We are literally organizing the world in fundamentally different ways.
So, the big question is, why? Where did these profound differences come from? Well, to figure that out, we have to hop in a time machine and go way, way back, about 2,500 years, to the cradles of Eastern and Western thought, ancient China and ancient Greece. Ancient Greece was a culture of individual agency, of debate, of formal logic. The whole goal was personal excellence, and the individual was the main unit of society. In stark contrast, you had ancient China with its traditions of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. It emphasized social harmony, interdependence, and balance. The goal was to find your proper place within the group. These ancient philosophies basically laid the tracks that our minds still run on today. Which, of course, brings us to a critical question for our time. In our super interconnected world, where these two powerful ways of thinking are constantly meeting and mixing, what happens next? Researchers basically see three possible paths forward. The first is that the East will just become more westernized, adopting that analytic mindset. The second is a kind of clash of civilizations, where these deep differences in how we see the world lead to constant misunderstanding and friction. And then there's the third, and maybe most hopeful option, a synthesis. A new, hybrid way of thinking that could emerge, combining the best of both. At the end of the day, the takeaway here is not that one system is better than the other. Not at all. Analytic thought gave us modern science and formal logic. Holistic thought gives us this deep appreciation for complexity and context. Both are incredibly powerful tools. The real question for the 21st century is this: can we become cognitively bilingual? Can we learn to see the world not just through one lens, but through both?